Picture a city that is, at this exact moment in history, the largest city on earth, the richest city on earth, the capital of an empire that controls a quarter of the world's land surface, a city of gaslit theatres and department stores with plate glass windows and steam locomotives and telegraphs, and a queen who has ruled for 53 years, a city that considers itself the pinnacle of human civilization, the centre of everything, the engine of the modern world. Now walk 3 miles east from that city, from the jewellers on Bond Street and the clubs on Pall Mall, and the gentlemen in their top hats stepping out of cabs outside the Reform Club. Walk east along the Strand, past the courts and the newspaper offices, past Ludgate Hill and up to St Paul's, then keep going, past the bank, past Aldgate and into Whitechapel. The gaslit theatres are gone. The department stores are gone. The top hats are gone. What you have instead is this: 600,000 people crammed into an area smaller than some English villages. Buildings so old their upper floors lean over the street and almost touch, shutting out the sky. Courts and alleys with no name, no number, no way in or out that you haven't been shown by someone who already knows. Streets so thick with coal smoke and horse dung, and the steam from tallow factories and the runoff from tanneries that, on a November evening, the air turns the colour of a dirty brass penny, and smells like something you would work hard to describe to anyone who had never been east of Aldgate. Add to that 14,000 registered lodging houses, most of them sleeping 40 people to a room. Add 11,000 pubs in a borough of 600,000. Add a river that floods twice a day and carries the effluent of the entire city. Add 3 million rats. That's Whitechapel. That's the East End of London in the 1890s. And somewhere in that, somewhere in the courts and the alleys and the fog that comes off the Thames on October evenings and turns the gaslights into smears of yellow in the darkness, there is you. So I make these history stories, and I genuinely have no idea if any of you are actually sleeping, or if you're all lying there with your eyes open in the dark, listening to a man describe Victorian prostitution like it's a bedtime story. Either way, I don't judge. Get comfortable. Turn the light off if you haven't already. Here we go. The first thing you need to know is that you did not choose this. That sounds like something you'd read on a placard in a museum, and I don't mean it that way. I mean it as a practical, logistical fact about how this happened. Nobody chooses this the way you choose a trade. Nobody decides at 16 that they'd like to be a prostitute in Whitechapel in the year 1893. Not even the women in the novels who have mysterious pasts and broken hearts, and some rich man waiting to redeem them at the end. You didn't have a novel. You had a sequence of events that led to this. And the sequence goes something like this. You were born in Gloucestershire, a village called Bisley, if you want a name, though there are dozens of villages it could have been. Your father worked on a farm. Your mother worked in the same house she was born in, and her mother before her, and so on back through time, until the concept of doing anything else hadn't existed yet. You went to the village school until you were 12. You could read after a fashion. You could do simple sums. You could write your name and address in a hand that, while not elegant, was legible. At 12, you went into service. A household in Cirencester, scullery maid, lowest of the low. You scrubbed pots from 5 in the morning until 9 at night and slept in a room the size of a cupboard, and were paid £8 a year and considered yourself reasonably fortunate because at least you ate. You were 19 when it ended. The family moved to India. The household was dissolved. The housekeeper gave you a character reference and shook your hand, and that was the end of 3 years. You came to London because everyone said London was where you went. There was always work in London. There was always something. You had the character reference and 3 months of saved wages and an address in Bethnal Green, where a cousin of someone your mother knew had a room she might let. The cousin of someone your mother knew turned out to be a woman named Florrie, who'd been drinking heavily since the death of her husband, and whose room was already occupied by 4 other women, and whose idea of a reasonable rent was more than you'd agreed to in the letter. The character reference was for a household in Gloucestershire. London households didn't know Gloucestershire. London households had their own girls, recommended by their own networks, and those networks didn't include you. 3 months of saved wages lasted 6 weeks in London. 6 weeks of cold and rain and lodging houses and walking miles to service agencies, only to be told the books were full, come back next month, no, we can't help you with that. And then the money ran out. And you needed 4 pence a night for a bed. And this is how you learn that everything in this city has a price. And the price of a bed is 4 pence. And the price of 4 pence when you have nothing is everything. Everything has a price. You learn to calculate it very fast. That was 2 years ago. Now you know the streets. Now you know the lodging houses. Now you know the names of the men on the corners and which ones to trust and which ones to avoid and which ones will smile at you and offer something that sounds like help and turn out to be something else entirely. Now you know the price of everything and the cost of everything and the difference between those two things, which is larger than most people realise. Your name is Agnes. Agnes Miriam Cole. You're 21 years old. You're not dead yet, which in Whitechapel in the 1890s is not a trivial achievement. The morning starts before you want it to. Not your choice. Nothing that happens in the first hour of the day is your choice. What happens is the lodging house wakes up, and the lodging house is not a subtle mechanism. 14 women and 6 men in a room that smells of everything they have done in it for the past 12 hours, and somewhere around 6 in the morning the first one gets up, and then they all get up because there is no staying asleep when 14 people are getting up around you. The smell is what you always notice first. Even now, even after 2 years of it, you'd think you'd stop noticing. You haven't. It's not one smell. It's everything laid on top of everything else in a room with one window that nobody opens because in October the window lets in fog and rain and the cold off the Thames, and a wet cold in a room with no fire is worse than a warm smell. Coal smoke underneath everything. The particular staleness of bodies sleeping in their clothes, which is most of them most nights. Because if you take your clothes off in a lodging house, you may wake to find them gone. Gin. Always gin. Someone in this room has been drinking, and the sweet sour smell of it has soaked into the straw palliaces and the blankets and the walls themselves. Your own smell, which you are aware of and try not to think about. Damp wool. Cheap tallow candles. And under all of it, the Thames. Always the Thames. You can smell it from anywhere in Whitechapel. Low tide and the river smells of mud and rot. High tide and it's something else. Something mineral, something cold. The smell of distance, of things arriving and things leaving. Welcome to Whitechapel, October 1893. The woman in the bed next to yours is already sitting up. Her name is Maisie. She's 34. Which in this life looks like 45. Her hair is grey at the temples and her hands are rough and red from the cold and from the work she does on the side, which is charring, which means she cleans other people's floors for a penny an hour when she can get it. Maisie is the closest thing you have to a friend. She doesn't look at you warmly. She looks at you the way people look at each other in this room, which is the way people look at each other when they're all competing for the same 4 pence and nobody has extra anything to give. but she knows your name, and she doesn't steal from you. And once when you were ill with a fever in July, she left a bit of bread beside your bed, and in here, that is as close to love as anything gets. Get up, she says, not unkindly. Sixsmith's letting the beds out again at 7. Sixsmith is the lodging housekeeper. His policy is, you pay your 4 pence the night before for the right to sleep, and at 7 in the morning the beds are available for the next paying customer, and if you haven't left by then he will assist you in leaving. The assistance involves language you'd rather not hear first thing in the morning. You get up. The floor is cold. The boards are bare and the cold comes up through them from the earth below and into your bare feet, and you find your boots where you left them, tucked under the edge of the palliasse, because you sleep with your boots tucked under you precisely so that they're still there when you wake up. Left them loose once, never again. Your feet go into your boots, and the boots are cold inside and the laces are stiff with damp. Your fingers work them anyway, slowly, methodically. Your hands are cold enough that the first knot takes 3 tries. Your dress is on. You slept in it. Everyone in this room slept in their clothes except Dolly in the corner, who has some arrangement going with Sixsmith that none of the rest of you ask about. And Dolly has a folded-up shawl she keeps under her head as a pillow, and is able to hang her dress on the peg near the door, which is the kind of luxury that marks the difference between having something and having nothing. You have a shawl, a heavy black wool shawl that you bought off a barrow in Petticoat Lane 2 winters ago for 11 pence, and have worn every single day since. It's your most valuable possession, not because of what it cost, but because of what it does, which is add a layer of warmth to the gap between your body and the October air. And in October in Whitechapel, the October air is not merciful. You wrap it around your shoulders and over your head, and the wool scratches at your neck, which it has always done, which you've stopped noticing. There's a basin of water near the door, brown and cold. You splash your face and the cold hits your skin like a slap, sharp and immediate, and for a moment your eyes are fully open and fully present in a way they weren't 30 seconds ago. This is the only purpose of the water. Not cleanliness, not really. Just presence, just waking up. You don't have a towel. You have the end of your shawl. It works. Maisie is already heading for the door. You follow. Sixsmith's is on Flower and Dean Street. If you know Whitechapel at all, you know Flower and Dean Street. If you know what happened in the autumn of 1888, 5 years ago, you know it for a different reason. The newspapers called it the most dangerous street in London. The reformers called it a moral catastrophe. The people who live here call it home. It's a street of common lodging houses, nothing but 200 yards of them packed side by side, their fronts all the same dirty brick, their signs all the same faded paint. Sixsmith's is number 18. Crossingham's is number 35. You know Crossingham's because one of the women who died in 1888 had been staying there the night it happened. Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. You know all their names. Everyone on this street knows all their names. Not because of the newspapers, though the newspapers wrote enough, God knows. Because this was here, this street, these houses. The women who died were women you might have known, women who slept in beds in houses you've slept in, women who walk the same 50 yards of pavement you walk every single night. It's been 5 years. Nobody has forgotten. You don't talk about it much. Nobody does. But it's there the way fog is there. Not always visible, but always present. Thickening on some nights more than others, and on the nights when it thickens you feel it in the way your shoulders sit, in the way your eyes move to the end of the alley before you step out of it, in the way you count the distance between yourself and the nearest lit window. 5 years, and no one ever caught him. The morning street is grey and cold and half made of fog. The gaslight on the corner is still burning, doing essentially nothing against the October morning, just a smear of yellow in the grey. The smell is coal smoke and horse dung, and the residual smell of the previous night's everything, because the streets in Whitechapel don't get cleaned the way the streets in Mayfair get cleaned. They get rained on occasionally, and the rain moves things from one end of the gutter to the other, and that is the municipal sanitation system for most of this borough. A cart is going past, coal from the smell of it. The horse is a big brown animal with a worn harness and patient eyes, and it clomps on the wet cobbles and doesn't look at you, and you don't look at it, and it passes, and the cart scrapes and rattles, and the noise of it fades down Commercial Street. You need 4 pence for tonight's bed. This is the arithmetic of your life. Not pounds and shillings, not even shillings. Pence. 4 pence is a night in Sixsmiths. A penny is a cup of tea from a coffee stall with a piece of bread. 2p is a bowl of soup from the shelter on Thrall Street. 6p is a decent meal and a cup of tea and a newspaper to read. 10p is a night's bed and 3 meals and a luxury or 2 if you're careful. Right now, this morning, you have 3 halfpence, which is 3 halfpence short of what you need for tonight. The arithmetic from there does the math for you. You are not always doing this. There was a period, about 8 months after you arrived in London, when you were working at a paper bag factory off the Commercial Road. 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, gluing the sides and bottoms of paper bags and stacking them in bundles of 100. The pay was 5 shillings a week, which is what unskilled factory work for women paid in the East End in 1891. 5 shillings a week is not nothing. 5 shillings a week is a bed and food and sometimes a halfpenny over. You did that for 5 months. Then the factory cut its workforce because trade was slow, and the women they kept were the ones who'd been there longest, and you were among the newest, so you were let go with a week's notice and a day's extra pay and nothing else. After the factory, there was matchmaking at a workshop near Stepney, which paid even less than the factory and involved white phosphorus, and you'd seen what white phosphorus did to the women who worked with it long enough. Phossy jaw, they called it. The phosphorus got into the jaw and rotted the bone, and the jaw glowed green in the dark, and then it had to be removed or you died of the sepsis. You left after 3 weeks. After that there was charring, same as Maisie, but charring jobs came and went and paid a penny an hour, and you couldn't live on them reliably. And then there was a week when you had nothing, absolutely nothing, and you needed 4 pence for a bed, and the alternative to 4 pence for a bed was sleeping rough in October in London, which could kill you, which had killed women you knew. And someone told you how to get 4 pence. And you did it once, and then again, and then you stopped counting. The coffee stall is on the corner of Commercial Street and Whitechapel High Street. A man named Albert runs it. A wide-faced man with a grey moustache and a canvas apron that started life white, and has long since become a record of every food he's ever handled. He opens at 5 in the morning and closes at noon, and charges a penny for a cup of tea and a penny for a thick slice of bread with dripping, and does not ask questions about where anyone has been or where they're going, which is why everyone on this street uses him. You get the tea, 1 penny, you can't afford the bread yet. The tea is strong and slightly stewed, and it comes in a tin mug, and you hold the mug with both hands, because the warmth of it moves through the metal into your palms and up into your cold fingers, and it's the best feeling of the morning. Not good, not wonderful, but the best thing that has happened so far in this day, and you take a moment to acknowledge it. Albert doesn't look at you. He's serving 3 other people. 2 men who look like dock workers heading to an early shift, and a woman whose name you know is Bess, who works in a laundry on Hanbury Street and is here every morning before 6. Cold one, Albert says to no one in particular. He says this nearly every morning from October to March. He's not wrong. Colder coming, Bess says. She has an accent from somewhere north. Yorkshire, maybe, that she's never lost despite years in London. I can feel it. You can't feel weather, Albert says. I can. My knee. Albert makes the noise of a man who has had this conversation before and would like to have it fewer times in future. You drink your tea. The warmth goes down your throat and into your chest, and you feel your shoulders drop half an inch. Just half an inch. But that half inch matters. The street is getting busier around you. The morning shift at the dock starts at 6 and the men are moving through. Heavy-built men in rough clothes, boots clattering on the cobbles. A few nod at Albert. A few don't look at you, and a few do, and the ones who do, you know what they're calculating. This is something you've gotten used to. The way men look at you now, not as a person exactly, as a possibility, a price. You can see it in their eyes, in the half-second assessment that happens before they decide whether to approach or not. And you've learned to look back in a way that communicates availability without communicating desperation. Because desperation is the one thing you cannot afford to show. Desperation means they offer you less, and you need 4 pence. The fog is starting to thin as the morning gets going. Not gone. It won't be gone until noon, if then. But thinned enough that you can see to the end of Commercial Street without the buildings disappearing into white. The street is fully waking now. The vendors are setting up. A man with a barrow of apples that won't be there by noon. A woman selling bootlaces from a tray around her neck, shouting her prices into the fog. A boy of about 12 running past with a bundle of newspapers under his arm. Morning edition. The ink still sharp enough to smell from a yard away. A man with a harmonium is setting up on the corner opposite. He's enormous, this man, shaped like a barrel with legs, wearing a coat that might have been fashionable in 1870 and a hat that never was. He cranks the handle of the harmonium and out comes something that is technically a tune, though which tune specifically is a matter of interpretation. And nobody on Commercial Street in October 1893 is in the mood for music at 8 in the morning, but he plays anyway. In the summer you like him. In October he's just noise. You need 3 more halfpence, which means a penny and a half, which means 1 client at the going rate, which depending on what they want and how much they have and how good you are at the negotiation is between 3p and a shilling. With the average hovering around 6p for something straightforward, and the full shilling being the exception rather than the rule. You do this math automatically now. 2 years of doing it means it runs in the background of everything, a constant low calculation, always knowing what you have and what you need, and what the gap is between them. You suspect this is what shopkeepers feel, this permanent mental ledger. Except the currency shopkeepers trade in is goods, and the currency you trade in is yourself, and at the end of the day a shopkeeper can go home and leave the shop. You don't get to leave the shop. Maisie comes to stand beside you. She's got a cup of tea too, and a piece of bread that she breaks in half without being asked and holds out to you. You take it without making a thing of it. This is how things work between you. No sentiment, no gratitude expressed out loud. Just the bread, taken, eaten. The bread is yesterday's. You can tell by the density of it, the way it resists your teeth slightly before giving. A day-old loaf from the baker on Brick Lane, sold off cheap in the morning. But bread is bread. and your body needs it, and you eat it and finish the tea, and the morning is slightly better than it was. Where last night? Maisie asks. She means, did you work? Mitre square end, you say. Late. Any trouble? 1. You don't elaborate. Most nights there's one who needs managing, one who doesn't want to finish the negotiation, who wants something different from what was agreed, who wants to take the transaction somewhere other than where you've both said it would go. Managing them requires a particular skill, which is projecting absolute certainty while feeling none of it. And you've gotten very good at this because you've had to. Maisie nods. Bess says there's a plain clothes up on Goulston Street. This means a police officer in civilian clothing. A plain clothes officer in Whitechapel is usually one of 2 things. Someone conducting surveillance on a specific address, or someone looking for violations of the Vagrancy Act, which is the primary legal instrument used against women like you. The Vagrancy Act says you cannot importune men in a public place. This is broadly defined and selectively enforced, and mostly means that if a constable wants to arrest you, he can. And what happens after that depends on which magistrate you get, and whether you have the fine money, and whether you've been arrested before. You've been arrested once, 3 months ago. You paid a 5-shilling fine that took you a week to earn back, and considered yourself fortunate it wasn't the alternative, which was 3 weeks in the workhouse. I'll stay east of that, you say. Maisie drinks her tea. The harmonium man settles into something that might be a hymn. The fog is still there, softened now, the morning light diffusing through it and turning everything the colour of old bone. The thing about this life that nobody outside of it understands is how much of it is waiting. There's an idea about it. You've seen the pictures in the illustrated papers, the engravings of Whitechapel women in their doorways, bold-faced and easy, that suggest something immediate, transactional, constant. That you're always working, always engaged, always in the middle of something. The reality is mostly this: standing on a corner in the cold, waiting. Waiting for the right time, which is neither so early that the men who approach you are dock workers with a penny and a sense of entitlement, nor so late that the streets are empty except for the constables and the desperate. The right time is a window, and the window moves depending on the day and the weather and which areas the police are working, and a dozen other variables that you've learned to read the way a farmer reads weather. Evening is best, dusk until midnight, when the pubs are open and the men have been drinking and their judgment is looser and their wallets are accessible, when the fog helps, because fog means constables move more slowly and see less far, when the week has been good and men have a bit of money. Sunday is usually poor, not because there's less custom, there is custom on Sundays, but because Sunday morning guilt makes Sunday evening men difficult. They want what they want, and then they want you to know they hate themselves for wanting it, and transferring that hatred outward toward you is something some of them do, and you've learned to identify those men before the transaction concludes. Tuesday and Wednesday are your best nights. Midweek, after the wages from Monday's work haven't entirely run out, before the weekend drinking starts in earnest. A working man on a Tuesday evening with 6pence in his pocket and the desire for something outside the walls of his life is your ideal client. He knows what he's there for. He pays. He leaves. You have a Tuesday economy and a Sunday theology and a Friday danger, and all of these things you know without having to think about them. Today is a Wednesday, which means tonight has potential. Tonight you need to be careful, to be present, to calculate right. But tonight is tonight. The day is first. You spend the morning doing what you spend every morning doing, which is a loose circuit of the neighbourhood, staying warm through movement when possible, sitting when you can, observing the economy of the street. This observation is not idle. It is professional intelligence. You need to know where the constables are, where other women are working, so you can arrange yourselves such that you're not directly competing, which corners have recent trouble, which lodging houses have come under new management and might change their prices. The East End is an economy as complex as any in the city, just smaller, just lower, just operating on a scale where the units of currency are pence rather than pounds, and the margin between a good day and a catastrophic one is measured in shillings. On Brick Lane the smell changes. The bakeries are going full force now, mid-morning, and the smell of bread baking is one of those smells that crosses every category, that reaches past hunger and poverty and the calculation of survival, and hits something older and more fundamental. The warmth of it drifts out of the bakery doors and into the cold October air, and for about 20 feet around each bakery the street smells of bread and warmth and something that could almost be called home. You slow down as you pass, not to stop. You can't afford bread from here, not real bread, not this morning. Just to pass through the warm smell like walking through a patch of sun. Around the corner from the bakery there is a school, a board school, built by the London School Board in 1879, its dark brick facade already stained with the coal smoke of 14 years. The children are going in for morning lessons. A teacher is standing at the door, a woman in a dark dress with her hair in a severe bun, and the children are filing past her into the dark entrance, and the children are of every kind that the East End produces, small and large, well-fed and hollow-cheeked, in decent clothes and in rags, boots and bare feet, this last being the kind of thing that stops you every time you see it, because the October cobblestones are cold enough to feel through your own worn soles. A girl of about 9 passes the door as you watch, dark hair, a face that is already serious, a dress that is clean but thin, and no coat, just her arms wrapped round herself against the cold. She has ink stains on her fingers. She's been practising her letters. You watch her go inside, and the door closes and the street is quiet again. You think about yourself at 9, the school in Bisley, the smell of chalk and wet coats, the teacher, a man named Mr. Haskins who smelled of pipe tobacco and had a capacity for patience that you did not fully appreciate at 12, but that seems, in retrospect, extraordinary. Mr. Haskins taught you to read. Properly, not just deciphering, but reading in the way that means something. He had a small shelf of books in the schoolroom, old and battered, and he would lend them on Friday afternoon to children who had been diligent, and the rule was return it by Monday morning. You always return by Monday morning. You always read it twice. You wonder if you would recognize yourself at 9. If that girl with the ink-stained fingers who read Mr. Haskins' books on Friday evenings would recognize this woman standing in the October fog of Brick Lane with 3 halfpence to her name. Probably not. People change as much as cities do. You keep walking. The market on Petticoat Lane, which is really called Middlesex Street, but nobody has called it that for as long as anyone can remember, is always going by mid-morning, even on a weekday. It sprawls off Middlesex Street into every alley and court within 100 yards, a vast improvised economy of things being bought and sold and bought again. Nothing staying still, everything circulating. Clothes mostly. Second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand. Clothes that have passed through so many people that their original owners would not know them. A coat that was someone's Sunday best in 1882 and is now here, hanging from a hook on a wooden frame for 10 pence. and the man selling it is doing up the buttons and saying something in Yiddish that probably translates as an assurance of quality. Boots. Everything here needs boots, and boots cost money, and second-hand boots from Petticoat Lane are the East End's shoe market. You stop for a moment at a stall because your left sole has a hole developing near the ball of your foot, and you've been feeling the cold cobblestones through it for a week. The cheapest pair here, a woman's lace-up in brown leather with a cracked upper but good soles, is 4p, which you don't have. You note the stall and the boots and move on. They might be there next week. You might have 4p next week. Everything in this market is someone's desperation. Somebody sold these boots because they needed the money more than the boots. Somebody sold that coat because they were hungry. The whole market is built on necessity, on the thing you must give up so that you can survive today. And someone else buys it, and eventually they too need money more than they need the thing, and it goes around again. You've sold things here. Early on, when there were still things to sell, a good wool petticoat your mother had given you, a pair of gloves that had belonged to the woman in the big house in Cirencester, left behind when she packed for India, a hat with a blue ribbon that you'd bought in better times and couldn't justify keeping in worse ones. Each of them went. Each of them became pence, became days of a bed, became survival for another week. Now there's not much left to sell. The shawl stays. Everything else that has value, you're wearing. There's a woman at a tea stall in the middle of the market who is there every day. Her name is Mrs. Greenberg, and she's 60 if she's day. A small, solid, dark-eyed woman who came from somewhere in Russia or Poland 15 years ago, and has been on this spot ever since. She sells tea at a halfpenny a cup and small pastries at a halfpenny each, and she knows everyone on the market by face if not by name. And she has, without ever discussing it, a policy of looking directly at whoever is in front of her without looking at what their clothes say about them. You buy a halfpenny cup of tea. That leaves you with 1 halfpenny. You need 3 more halfpence. Cold, Mrs. Greenberg says, handing you the cup. It's not a complaint, just a word. Very, you say. My neighbour says snow before the month's out. It's early for snow, she shrugs. My neighbour doesn't care about early. You drink the tea standing at her stall and watch the market move around you. A man arguing the price of a waistcoat. 2 women examining a dress, turning it in the light, checking the seams. A boy darting through the crowd with something under his arm, moving too fast for his age. The market is the constant noise of it. Vendors shouting, people haggling in 6 languages. English, Yiddish, some Italian. The particular accent of Bethnal Green that is English but barely. The creak of cartwheels and the slap of leather and the occasional dog barking at something it has decided to be outraged by. You watch, and you think about tonight, and you think about the 4p and the arithmetic of it. 1 client at 6p gives you a penny to spare. 2 clients at 4p gives you 6p change. 1 good client at a shilling gives you 8p change, which is tomorrow's bed almost done, and a proper meal and something approaching a day without calculating everything. You don't always get a shilling. But tonight is Wednesday. The afternoon is its own thing. The afternoon in Whitechapel in October is the narrow channel between the morning's work of surviving and the evening's work of earning, and in that channel you do whatever you can do to prepare yourself for the evening. This means primarily looking as much like something other than what you are as possible. This sounds simple. It is not. You have what you have. A dress, which is black wool, and has been black wool for 3 years, and the black is now more the colour of very dark charcoal. Your shawl. A pair of earrings, brass, that catch the light. You have pins for your hair and a piece of mirror the size of your palm that you found in the street 6 months ago and have kept. In the evening, with the gas lights on, you can make these things do work that they couldn't do in daylight. You know how light works in your favour. You know that the gas lamps on Commercial Street are positioned such that if you stand within their light, you are visible, but your face is somewhat softened. You know that the lamps in the alleys are farther apart and dimmer, which means details that might disadvantage you in full light become irrelevant. You know that men in the evening see what they want to see largely, and your job is not to disrupt that seeing. This is craft. You've learned it the way you learned anything else, by watching, by trying, by failing and adjusting. Maisie taught you some of it. The rest you learned yourself. There's a woman named Lillian who used to work Whitechapel. Stopped 2 years ago when a man she'd been seeing set her up in rooms in Stepney. She still comes back occasionally just to visit. She told you once. The trick is not looking available. Looking available makes you look desperate. Looking like you're going somewhere, always somewhere specific. That's what works. Men want to feel like they've stopped something, like they're the reason you paused. You thought about that for a long time. You still think about it. It's the most useful thing anyone ever told you about this work, and it cost you nothing, which is rare. The afternoon passes slowly. You find a doorway on Wentworth Street that's protected from the wind, which today is coming off the river and carrying the full weight of an October Thames behind it, and you stand in it for a while and watch the street and rest your feet. Your feet hurt by afternoon. They hurt every afternoon. The boots not good boots, and the cobblestones not kind, and you've been walking since 6 in the morning. The sensation is specific, not a sharp pain. A dull, distributed ache that lives in your heels and in the balls of your feet and in your ankles, and when you stand still it eases slightly, and when you sit it eases more, and when you sleep it goes away almost entirely, and then you wake up and stand up and it's back within half an hour. You sit on the edge of a windowsill and take your left boot off and feel the hole in the sole with your finger. The cobblestone had been wet this morning and the wet had come through. Your stocking, the left one, is still slightly damp. You press your foot against your leg for the warmth of it and put the boot back on. 3 halfpence. A woman passes the doorway pushing a perambulator. The perambulator has seen better days. One wheel is slightly bent and wobbles with every push. But it's being pushed carefully, the woman's attention entirely on it. Inside, presumably a baby, though from here you can't see. The woman is young, younger than you perhaps, thin-faced, with the exhaustion in her eyes that settles in when you're caring for something else around the clock, and your own needs have moved down a list that is already too long. She passes without looking at you, and you watch her go, and you think about the choices that led each of you to be where you are right now, you in this doorway and her with that perambulator, and you can't identify a specific point where the roads diverged because it wasn't like that. It was gradual, a sequence of small things. The wind comes down Wentworth Street and finds the gap in your shawl where it doesn't quite cover your left shoulder, and you pull the wool tighter. There is a letter in the pocket of your dress. You carry it everywhere. It's been carried everywhere for 8 months, and it's soft with folding and refolding, and you can read it without opening it. It's from your mother. Last February. She doesn't know what you do for a living. She knows you're in London. She knows you're having a hard time finding steady work, which is what you've told her, which is true in the way that facts can be true while leaving vast territories unexplored. She asks if you're eating properly. She says your father's knee is worse this winter. She says your younger sister is courting a boy from the next village and everyone thinks it will come to something. She ends, "We miss you, Agnes. Come home when you can. You cannot go home. Not because you can't afford the train fare, though you can't. Not because there's no room, though there isn't much. Because going home means being there, in Bisley, with your parents who miss you and your sister who is courting and the life you understood, and you're not any longer a person who would fit into that life. Something has happened in the past 2 years that cannot be undone. You're not ruined, exactly. That word is what the newspapers and the reformers use, and it implies a wholeness that came before that you're not sure you had to begin with. But you're changed in ways that the village and your mother's kitchen would make more visible rather than less. You put the letter away without having taken it out. The afternoon. At 4 o'clock there is a shelter on Thrall Street run by the Salvation Army. A woman named Captain Birch is in charge of it. A tall, straight woman in the Salvation Army uniform, who has the kind of face that suggests she has seen most of what there is to see in this neighbourhood, and has decided to keep helping anyway. The shelter does soup and bread, a bowl and a slice for nothing. Nothing means nothing. No sermon required, no conversion demanded, no questions asked. You're not proud. You go. The soup is the same as it always is. Thin, vegetable, with the ghost of a ham bone somewhere in its history. The bread is today's, which means it's soft enough to tear without difficulty, and the crust has some crunch left in it. You eat standing up because all the chairs are taken. The shelter is full of women mostly, some children. 2 or 3 old men who have the particular hollowness of men who've slept outside too many nights. A girl, 12, maybe 13, is sitting on the floor in the corner, eating her soup with the focused attention of someone who's been hungry for a long time and is taking this seriously. She has red hair and freckles and her dress is too small. Her wrists sticking out past the cuffs by 2 inches. Someone's growing child, outgrowing the only clothes available. You look at her, and she looks at you, and you nod, and she nods, and goes back to her soup. Captain Birch moves through the room. She knows most of the names. She stops and speaks with people, and the conversations are short and quiet, and not about religion mostly, but about practical things. Where the next shelter is, what the weather's supposed to do, whether there's laundry work at a certain address. She carries information the way the coffee stall on Commercial Street carries warmth, as a byproduct of the actual function, but often more important. She stops near you. Agnes, she knows your name. She knows most names. You look cold. It's October, you say, which is what you say instead of yes. There's coats come in, she says, from a church in Kensington, some decent ones. Come by Saturday morning and you'll get first look. A coat, a proper coat over the shawl. The arithmetic of that. Warmth that doesn't cost you a penny. Warmth that doesn't come out of the 4 pence you need for a bed. Saturday morning, you say, before 9. She's already moving on. Mrs. Ellis wants half for herself and we'll have arguments. You eat the rest of your soup. The girl with the red hair is watching you. Children in the East End watch things with an assessment you don't often see elsewhere, as if early on they've learned that watching carefully is survival. This child has that look. Sharp eyes, old eyes, in a 12-year-old face. What are you looking at, you say? Not unkindly, just asking. Your earrings, she says. They're pretty. The brass earrings. They catch the light from the shelter's one decent lamp. They cost you 1.50 pennies from a barrow 3 months ago, and you've worn them every day since. Thank you, you say. She goes back to her soup. You finish yours. The bread is good for what it is. Your stomach quiets down from where it had been. The evening comes early in October. You notice this every year, the way the afternoon just stops one day. the way the light cuts off at 4 and you're suddenly in darkness where an hour ago there was still afternoon, and it still surprises you. Not intellectually, you know it happens, but bodily. Your body expects more day and gets darkness instead, and there's a small shock to it every time. By 5 the gaslights are on. Whitechapel's gaslight is not Mayfair's gaslight. It's thinner. The lamps farther apart, some of them with mantles that need replacing, burning dim and orange rather than the proper yellow-white. But it's light, and light means the evening is beginning. You position yourself. This is the right word. Position. It's a considered choice. Durward Street, just off Whitechapel Road, where the gaslight is decent and there's a pub on the corner that brings men past at regular intervals, and a chip shop 40 yards away that produces a warm, vinegar-sharp smell that hangs in the air and makes everything feel marginally more welcoming. 2 other women are already here. You know them both. Nell is 30 or thereabouts, from Bermondsey originally, been in Whitechapel as long as you have. Clara is younger, 20 or so, from somewhere in Essex, been here 6 months and still looks it slightly. Still has the occasional wide-eyed moment in a crisis. They nod at you. You nod back. You spread out along the pavement, not too close together, not so far apart that you lose the safety of proximity. This is important and not discussed. You keep each other in sight, not always in earshot, but in sight. If something goes wrong, if a man becomes difficult, if a constable comes, if anything shifts, you're there for each other in the way that a net is there under a tightrope walker. You hope it's never needed. You're glad it's there. The evening starts slowly. It usually does. The men coming out of work at 6 have to get home, eat, and then either go out or not. And those who go out mostly head for the pubs first, and the pubs warm them up and loosen their wallets, and the first clients of a good evening come around 7. Until 7, you mostly wait. The cold has settled in. It's a damp cold, the kind that comes off the river and gets into your clothes and stays there, not just on the skin, but deeper, in the muscles. Your back aches. The doorway you had this afternoon was better than this, but this corner is where the work is, and the work is what you're here for. A man passes, a dock worker, you'd guess, from his build and the calluses on the hands you can see when the gaslight catches him. He looks at you, you look back. He hesitates, he keeps walking. This happens more than people think. The hesitation and then the walking. Men who want this and then don't, who calculate some cost of their own and find it too high or not high enough or just wrong for tonight. You don't take it personally. It's not personal. Another man. Older. The kind of older where you cannot quite tell if he's 50 or 65. The kind of life that makes age ambiguous. He stops. Evening, he says. Evening, you say. There is a conversation. It is brief. He is particular, and you are professional, and the price is agreed. 6pence. And the arrangement is for 15 minutes in the yard behind the chip shop, where there's an overhang that keeps the worst of the weather out. He pays first, which is the rule you always enforce, which is the rule Maisie told you to enforce and that you will enforce until the day you stop doing this, however that day comes. He pays 6pence. It goes into the pocket of your dress, not the same pocket as the letter. 15 minutes. The overhang smells of chip fat and damp brick. The cold is intense. When it's over, you straighten your dress and he leaves without speaking, and you go back to the corner and Nell raises an eyebrow and you give a small nod and she gives the smallest of smiles and looks back at the street. 6pence and 3 halfpence. You need 4pence for the bed. You have more than 4pence. You have, the math runs, 2 pence over the bed, plus the tea and bread you still need, which is 2 pence, so you're about even. You need at least one more client. The evening is young. The pub on the corner releases a group of men at 7:30, when the volume inside must have reached a point that made stepping out seem reasonable. 4 of them, loud and warm from the drink and the press of bodies, their breath making clouds in the cold. They're not poor men. Skilled tradesmen, you'd guess, from the quality of their coats. Not fine, but decent, not worn through. Men who earn enough to drink regularly. 2 of them look at you as they pass. One of them, a wide-faced, red-cheeked man, maybe 35, stops. "Hello, then." "Hello," you say. His friends keep walking. He doesn't. The negotiation goes well. He's drunk enough to be agreeable and sober enough to transact sensibly, which is the ideal calibration. A shilling. He pays. You take him to the same overhang. When he's gone, you have 2 shillings and 3 halfpence, which is an excellent evening by any measure. A shilling for a bed at 6 Smiths tonight, and tonight's already paid for means you're ahead. 2 nights of beds if you're careful, a decent meal, even possibly a small luxury. You let yourself feel this for a moment. The mild warmth of arithmetic coming out right. It doesn't last. At 8 o'clock, a constable comes around the corner. Not a plain clothes, a uniformed officer, which is actually less threatening in some ways because you can see him coming. And in uniform, he's usually more interested in moving people along than in arresting them. The arrest paperwork's considerable, and the uniformed constables are busy men. He looks at you. He looks at Nell. He looks at Clara. "Evening," he says. The same word that means a dozen different things depending on who says it. "Evening, officer," you say. Nell and Clara echo it. "Move along now," he says. "You know the rules." "Of course," you say. You all 3 of you move. Not far. Around the corner, down Whitechapel Road, reassembled near the entrance to the underground station, which opened just a few years ago and is already one of the fixed stars of this neighbourhood. The yellow light from the entrance spills out into the street, and there are people coming in and out, and the constable is around the corner, and you wait 10 minutes and drift back. This is the dance. It's been the dance for as long as women have stood on London corners, and constables have been paid to move them. Nobody is fooled. Everyone knows what's happening. The law says certain things cannot happen, and the reality says they happen anyway. And in the space between those 2 things, there is a constant negotiation that looks like movement and is actually just renegotiation of position. You once heard someone, a man from one of the settlement houses who came to give a talk about social reform, describe this as a systemic problem. He used those words, systemic problem. He had very clean hands and a good coat, and he described your life with the precision of someone who had read about it extensively, and the understanding of someone who had not lived one day of it. He wasn't wrong exactly. He just wasn't right in the way that matters. The fog thickens around 9. October in Whitechapel, and the fog comes off the Thames in the evenings and settles into the streets and alleys and makes everything close. The gaslights become orange smears. Sounds carry differently. Closer or not at all depending on the fog. A cart that sounds like it's 50 yards away turns out to be 10. A voice that seems just behind you is across the street. You know fog. You've been in it for 2 years of Whitechapel evenings. You know it the way sailors know weather, not as an event but as a condition, something to be read and navigated. In the fog your back is never to a wall, and your face is always toward the street, and you know exactly how many paces it is from any given corner to the nearest lit door. Not because you think about it, because your body knows. Because your body has been trained into knowing by the simple accumulating weight of 5 years since autumn 1888, when 5 women died on these streets and no one was ever caught. The fog does something to the fear, thickens it in a way. In good weather, the streets are visible, and the men who are a problem are visible, and the constables are visible, and visibility is a form of safety. In fog, everything is partial, partially visible, partially known. The man at the edge of the gaslight is half a man, the other half swallowed by the grey. You think about this more than you let yourself admit. The newspapers in 1888 had a lot to say about the women who died. Some of it was compassionate, most of it was not. The most common framing was, women living this life, women of this class, women in these streets. These women had already diminished their claim on safety by the choices they had made. The newspapers didn't say it quite that plainly. They found ways to imply it that were more literary. But you understood what was being said, and you understood that the people saying it had never stood on a November corner needing 4pence for a bed, had never followed the arithmetic of survival down to its last entry, and found this at the bottom of the column, had never had the particular experience of knowing that the thing you're doing to survive is also the thing that the people who write the newspapers and make the laws consider sufficient reason for whatever happens to you next. You carry this the way you carry the letter in your pocket, all the time, everywhere, folded into a pocket where you can reach it without taking it out. A man approaches. He's thin and quick-moving, and his hat is pulled down and his collar is up, and you can't see much of his face, and your body does something before your mind does, before you consciously decide. A small retraction, a single step backward. He passes. He's not stopping. He's heading somewhere, head down, walking fast. Nothing to do with you. Your heart is going. You wait for it to settle. This is also part of the work. The management of the fear. It cannot be absent entirely. Absent fear is a different kind of danger, but it cannot be dominant. If it's dominant, you make bad decisions. You accept clients you shouldn't. You take money before calculating the situation. You position yourself badly. Maisie taught you. You've got to stay sharp, not scared. Sharp. The difference between sharp and scared is function. Scared freezes you. Sharp moves you. It's 9:30 and you have 2 shillings and 3 halfpence, and you have your bed paid for, and you have a pennorth and a halfpenny over, and it's cold and the fog is thickening, and you start thinking about whether to call it a night. But then you think about the coat Captain Birch mentioned, the coats from Kensington, the ones you can look at Saturday morning if you're there before 9. And a coat is warm, and warmth in winter is almost exactly equivalent to money, because warmth keeps you from getting ill, and ill is the most expensive thing that can happen to you. And so you think, one more, and you'll go. Around 10 o'clock there is a music hall on the Whitechapel Road called the Cambridge. You're not going in, can't afford the price of entry on a working night. But men come out of the Cambridge from the second performance at about 10:15, usually in good humour, usually with a bit of drink in them, usually disposed to generosity of a general kind. You drift up to Whitechapel Road. Nell and Clara are ahead of you by half a street. You've separated further this hour, the natural drift of the evening shifting you round like logs in a river. The Cambridge is a place of another world. Even from outside, even in the fog you can feel it. The light that comes through its doors when they open, warm yellow light, and the sound of it, a brass band playing something you half recognise, and voices, a lot of voices. the particular merged roar of a large crowd reacting to something with delight. Laughter, applause, the stomp of feet on wooden floors. The women inside wear silk, or the impression of silk, which is satin and cheaper, but does the same work in the gaslight. Red and green and deep blue. Their hair is elaborate, built up and pinned. The kind of hair that takes an hour and someone to help you with it. They wear gloves. Their gloves are white. You know this because once, a year ago, you saw inside. A man had brought you here, a foreman from a factory in Bethnal Green who was celebrating something and felt expansive, and he'd brought you in through the side entrance, and the thing you remembered most was not the performance, which was a comedian who told jokes you didn't understand, but the light, the quantity of it. Gaslight on mirrors, mirrors multiplying the gaslight, the whole interior drenched in a warm golden multiply of itself, and the women in their satin dresses moving through it like they were part of the light. And then you'd looked at your own hands in that light, and they looked like your hands, like hands that had worked and been cold and hadn't had enough cream, and you'd thought, the light is the same, but what it shows is different. And you'd understood something about how light works as a language and who gets to be fluent in it. The second performance ends at 10, and the doors open and the crowd comes out into Whitechapel Road, and the fog swallows them and you're among them, and it's fine. The fog is fine. The fog means you're just part of the crowd for a moment, just someone going somewhere. A man stops, well dressed, which in this context means a decent suit and a hat and shoes that have been recently polished, still showing the gloss even in the foggy gaslight. He's about 40. His face is pleasant looking, or neutral at least, not the face of anyone with a plan that requires your fear. You read faces constantly. You read this one in seconds. Clerk, maybe. Office worker. Not a factory man and not a gentleman. Something in between, which in London in 1893 is a large and growing category of people. The men who work with pens and ledgers and typewriters, the respectable poor becoming the lower respectable middle, and who have enough money for a Saturday, at the music hall and a Tuesday with a woman on the street, and enough shame about the latter that they'll present themselves as more spontaneous than they are. Good evening, he says. Good evening, you say. The negotiation. 8 pence for the alley behind the pub on Adler Street. He knows the arrangement. He's been here before, or somewhere like here. He pays first. The 8 pence goes into your pocket. Afterward. 10 minutes, no more. The alley smelling of straw and horse and the residue of the pub drains. He straightens his hat and his coat and becomes again the man who'd been at the music hall, and he says good night quite politely and walks back toward the road without looking back. You stand in the alley for a moment. The fog is very thick now, the alley almost entirely without light, just the distant orange suggestion of the street gaslight at one end. You can hear the street, carts, voices, the faint brass echo of something still playing at the Cambridge. The damp cold of the October night is in your breath, your fingers, the soles of your feet. 2 shillings and 11 pence halfpenny. Enough for tonight's bed, already paid. Enough for tomorrow's bed. Enough for 3 meals if you're careful. Enough for the boots almost. 1 more night, and the boots. You pull your shawl tighter and step out of the alley and back into the fog. There is a bridge, not Tower Bridge, which is further east, completed just last year in 1894, an engineering spectacle of steel and stone and Victorian self-confidence. Not London Bridge, further west, old and plain and busy. This is Waterloo Bridge, which you walk to sometimes when you need to see something larger than Whitechapel. Tonight you walk west. It takes 40 minutes and your feet protest the whole way, but you walk anyway. Because the thing about living inside the very close streets of the East End is that occasionally your mind needs to be somewhere it can see farther than 50 yards. The fog is everywhere, but it lifts slightly over the river, the way fog does over open water, not gone but thinned, and from the middle of Waterloo Bridge you can see in both directions along the Thames for perhaps a quarter mile before it becomes pure grey. The river below is black and moving. You can hear it, or you think you can, under the traffic on the bridge, a low, continuous presence, the movement of something very large and very old that will still be moving when everything on its banks has changed into something unrecognisable. The Thames, the artery of the city's oldest street, the one that was here before any of the others, before any of the buildings, before London was London. The Romans came up, the Normans came up it. Henry VIII took his court along it on royal barges, and now coal barges and steam tugs and the ferry from Waterloo to Hungerford, and 1,000 other things, back and forth, east and west, day and night. The river doesn't stop for fog. You lean on the stone parapet and look east, toward Whitechapel, toward where you've just come from. You can't see it. The fog makes everything anonymous, but you know it's there, 3 miles in that direction, the low brick warren of it, the gas lamps doing their inadequate best. From here you can also see the lights of the South Bank, the Surrey side, blurred and orange through the fog. And to the west, dimly, the bridges strung like a necklace in the darkness. The city is enormous. You knew this before you came to it. But knowing it as a fact and knowing it like this, from the middle of a bridge in October fog at 11 at night, are different kinds of knowing. The city goes in every direction farther than you can see. It is full, stuffed full, of people trying to get through their days, sleeping in lodging houses and grand houses and worst case nothing at all, working in factories and offices and grand establishments and worst case here like you, eating or not eating, warm or cold, getting what they need or finding the gap between what they need and what they have and trying to close it. Charles Booth has been surveying this city for several years now. He publishes maps, colour-coded maps of London poverty. Black for the worst, dark blue for the very poor, light blue for the poor, purple for the mixed, pink for the comfortable, red for the well-to-do, yellow for the wealthy. Whitechapel is black and dark blue, nearly entirely. Kensington, where Captain Birch's coats come from, is pink and red and yellow. The coats travel from pink and yellow to black and dark blue, and you will stand in a line on Saturday morning to receive one, and this will be considered charity, and it is charity, and you're grateful for it, and the fact that you're grateful for it, and the fact that it needs to happen at all are two things that do not resolve neatly into any simple conclusion. You stand on the bridge for a while and the river moves beneath you, and the fog holds the city in its soft grey nothing, and you think about the girl in the school doorway this morning, the one with the ink-stained fingers and the serious face, and you think about where she might stand on Booth's map in 20 years, and you don't know the answer, and neither does anyone else, and neither did anyone know the answer for you 20 years ago in Bisley. The wind comes off the river and finds the gap in your shawl, and you pull it tight and turn back toward the city and start walking east. The lodging house is still and dark when you let yourself in through the side door. Sixsmith's side door with the broken latch that everyone on the street knows about, but that Sixsmith either doesn't know about or has decided not to fix because he is, under everything, a pragmatist who understands that his residents need to come home at hours when he's asleep. The stairs creak under your weight, the specific creak of each tread a familiar vocabulary now, you knowing which to avoid and which are unavoidable. The room smells of what it always smells of, the breathing of 14 people distributed through the dark. Your palliasse is where you left it. You unlace your boots and tuck them under the edge, and you lie down and pull the thin blanket up, and the cold of the room is everywhere except where your body is, which is warm, which is yours. Maisie's breathing is the steadiest thing in the room, slow and deep. She falls asleep faster than anyone you've ever known. The ability to fall asleep quickly, you've learned, is a skill like any other, and it belongs to people who have been very tired for a long time. Your own sleep comes more slowly. It usually does. You think about the day, the arithmetic of it. 2 shillings 11 pence halfpenny, minus 4 pence for the bed which is already paid, minus a penny for the tea this morning, and a halfpenny for the tea at the market, and the bread at the shelter was free. 2 shillings 6 pence approximately to start tomorrow with, which is almost 3 days of beds if you're careful and don't eat, which you can't do, not eating, so call it 2 days of beds with eating. This is the arithmetic of your life, not how much you have, but how many days it buys. You think about the boots, 4 pence for the boots on Petticoat Lane, if they're still there. By the end of the week, maybe. You think about the coat on Saturday, the Kensington coat coming to the Salvation Army shelter. You think about standing in line before 9 and what it would mean to have a coat over your shoulders, another layer between you and the October Thames wind. You think about the letter from your mother, your father's knee worse this winter, your sister courting the boy from the next village. You think about Bisley and the school and Mr. Haskins with his pipe tobacco and his shelf of books and his extraordinary patience, and whether he would know you now and what he would say. You close your eyes. The room breathes around you. The Thames is somewhere east, moving the way it always moves. The fog is still there, pressed against the window, and through it, or past it, or in it somewhere, the city is still going. The night watchmen on their rounds, the gin shops, the early carters, the women on the corners, Nell, Clara, the others, the women whose names you know and the ones you don't, all of them out there in the cold, in the fog, in the October night, calculating. Sleep comes the way it does when you've been on your feet since 6, not suddenly, not gently exactly, but inevitably. Your thoughts become less connected. The arithmetic stops. The planning stops. The weight of the day comes down through you into the palliasse and the straw and the floor and the earth. The harmonium man will not be there tomorrow morning. It's too cold for the harmonium man. But Albert will be there at his stall on Commercial Street, his grey moustache and his canvas apron, and his stewed tea and his 4 words, "Cold one today." Yes, cold one today. But you'll have 3 pence for the tea and the bread tomorrow morning, and you'll have the bed already paid for, and these things are not nothing. In a place where nothing is guaranteed and everything costs and the margin between adequate and catastrophe is measured in pennies, these things are real and solid and yours. You have earned them. The fog presses against the window. The city breathes. You sleep. The days come one after another in the way that days do when they're all variations of the same day. The smell of the room, the cold floor, the tea from Albert's stall, the slow circuit of the neighbourhood, the Petticoat Lane market, the afternoon corner, the evening work. The boots happen on a Thursday. 4 pence from the barrow man who has held them, or perhaps they were held by luck, and you carry them back to the lodging house and change out of the old pair in the room, and the difference is immediate. The new-to-you soles are solid, no gap, no cold coming through, and the leather is stiff, but it will give, and you walk the evening shift with a better foundation, and it changes everything, or not everything. But the specific thing that is your relationship with the cobblestones, which is not nothing. The coat happens on a Saturday. You are at the shelter on Thrall Street before 8. Maisie is with you, which is unusual. Maisie is usually slower on Saturday mornings, but she heard about the coats and has her own reasons. Captain Birch is there, and so is a woman named Mrs. Ellis, who is eyeing the pile of clothing with the focused attention of someone who knows what quality looks like and intends to recognise it first. The coats from Kensington are, objectively, other people's discarded coats. This is a fact. They have been worn and passed on, and they carry in their fabric the history of different rooms, different weather, different circumstances. But they are coats, real coats, wool, with buttons that button and lapels that turn up against the wind. You find one, navy blue, heavier than the shawl, with a collar that stands up in a lining of some brown fabric and only one missing button, which is replaceable. You put it on in the shelter. The warmth is immediate, not dramatic, not miraculous, just immediate. A layer between you and everything outside. Captain Birch sees you putting it on and nods. Good one, she says. Thank you, you say. Don't thank me. Thank whoever left it. She moves on. Maisie has found a grey coat short, missing a button at the cuff but otherwise sound. She holds it up and looks at it and puts it on and does not say anything, but something in her face shifts. Something that is usually set very firm relaxes slightly, briefly. You both walk back to Sixsmith's with your coats on. The November air. It's November now, not October. Time moves in small steps here. The November air hits you differently through wool that is substantial rather than thin, and you feel the difference in your shoulders, the absence of the hunch you've been carrying for weeks. Small things. Everything in this life is small things. Winter comes to Whitechapel the way winter comes everywhere, except that here it has more to work with. More exposed streets, more poorly heated houses, more people with insufficient clothing and food. The cold settles in like an unwanted lodger that will not leave until March and knows it, and spends November establishing itself. The river fogs are worse in November. The coal smoke from a million fires combines with the Thames mist and the low sky, and produces something that the newspapers call a particularly pea-soup affair when it's bad enough. And on those days the gaslights become visible only from 10 feet, and the streets become tunnels of grey through which you navigate by sound and memory and the particular smell of each corner, each pub, each alley. You know this street by smell now. This is the knowledge of 2 years. Not maps, not names, but smell and sound, and the feel of the cobbles under your feet and the width of the pavement at each point. All of it stored in the body rather than the mind, accessible without thinking. On the worst fog nights you don't work. Not worth the risk. On fog nights, the other risk is also worse. The thing you carry since 1888. The fog thickening the fear the way it thickens everything else. And on the worst nights you stay in and contribute a penny to Sixsmith's communal fire, which he lights on especially cold evenings in the main room, and you sit near it and watch the flames and let your hands warm. Other women sit there too on those nights. Maisie. A woman named Pearl who works the Stepney end and comes to Sixsmiths when her usual place is full. A woman named Dora, who is older, mid-40s, and has a cough that she's had since September, and that is getting worse, and that nobody mentions directly because mentioning it would require acknowledging what it means, and what it means is tuberculosis, most likely the disease of the poor, of the cold and the close quarters, and there is no money for a doctor and no treatment, even if there were a doctor, and the only trajectory is the one you can see if you look, and so nobody looks. Dora tells stories. On the fire nights she tells stories, not like anyone telling a planned story, but like someone whose thoughts happen to organise themselves into narrative. She grew up in Portsmouth. Her father was in the Navy. She came to London at 17 for reasons that sound like your reasons, and are like your reasons. She's been in Whitechapel since 1875. 18 years. 18 years, you say once. You've been here 18 years? Give or take. She coughs, covers it with her hand. Started on Osborne Street, moved to Thrall Street in 1880. Been around Flower and Dean mostly since then. And you never went somewhere else? Left? She looks at you with the look of someone who has been asked this question enough times that the question itself is part of the landscape now. Where would I go? You don't have an answer. You think about Bisley, and you think about your mother's kitchen, and you think about the girl you were at 12 with the ink-stained fingers, and the life of the village spread out around her, like something that would simply continue, just as it was, for as long as she wanted it to. I don't know, you say. Exactly. Dora watches the fire. The city gets into you, even this part of it, maybe especially this part. She coughs again, shorter this time. 18 years of these streets, and I know them better than I know my own face. Where would I go that I'd know that well? You think about that for a long time after. You think about it on a Thursday in December when the weather turns very cold, and the water in the basin at Sixsmiths is frozen solid in the morning. A skin of ice that you have to break with your fist, your knuckles coming back wet and cold, the ice breaking in pieces that spin slowly in the brown water below. You think about it on a Sunday when the lodging house has its quarterly inspection by a sanitary officer from the borough council, a young man with a clipboard and an expression that is trying to be professionally neutral and achieving about 80% of that. And he walks through the room making notes, and you all stand in it while he does, and the inspection takes 20 minutes, and produces a report that you will never see, but whose conclusions you already know, which are overcrowded but legally permissible, sanitary facilities inadequate but technically present, no immediate action required, technically present. You know what Flower and Dean Street looks like to the people who write those reports. You know what you look like in those reports. Women of this class, women of this neighbourhood, women who have, through various failures of character and circumstance, arrived at the specific intersection of poverty and commercial sex and November fog. The reports don't say who made the circumstances. They never do. On a Thursday in the second week of December, 3 things happen. The first is that Dora's cough gets bad enough that someone finally says the word out loud. Not a doctor. Pearl, who has seen it before, who says in the morning when Dora is asleep very quietly that Dora needs to go to the London hospital. The London hospital on Whitechapel Road, the great red brick Victorian philanthropic building that is the nearest thing this part of the city has to medical care. It's free. It always has been, funded by voluntary subscriptions, by the same network of charitable wealth that sends coats from Kensington to Salvation Army shelters. Free to use. But you have to go. getting Dora to go takes 2 days of persuasion, and a morning when her cough is bad enough that she can't stand up from the palliasse without help. You and Maisie walk her down Whitechapel Road, one on each side in the December cold, your new-to-you blue coat buttoned to the neck. The hospital is enormous. That's the first thing. You'd passed it 100 times and never been inside, and the inside is different from the outside. The entrance hall, high-ceilinged and tiled in dark cream, smelling of carbolic and something underneath that might be ether, and the sounds of it. Footsteps on hard floors, distant voices, the particular institutional quiet of a place where everyone is either working very hard or very ill. A nurse takes Dora. Not immediately, there's the process of registration and waiting, there's always waiting. But eventually a nurse comes and speaks to Dora, and you and Maisie stand to the side, and the nurse is efficient and not unkind, and doesn't ask any questions that you would have to lie to answer. And Dora goes with her, still coughing, her grey coat buttoned, looking smaller in the hospital than she looked anywhere else. You and Maisie wait an hour. A doctor comes and speaks to you briefly and says words that include consumption and advanced and diet and rest. And each of these words is a translation of something you already knew. And the doctor is also not unkind and also not able to change what the words mean. You walk home without talking much. The second thing that happens on that Thursday is that you receive a letter. Not from your mother this time. From a settlement house in Bethnal Green, one of the places that have been opening up in the East End as the educated classes have developed an enthusiasm for coming to live among the poor. This one is run by a couple from Oxford, a clergyman and his wife, and the wife's name is Mrs. Alcott, and she runs a reading room and a sewing circle, and various other projects, and someone, somewhere, has given her your name, and she has written to say that if you would like to come to the reading room on Tuesday evenings, there are books available for loan, and the room is warm. The room is warm. You read this twice. You think about Mr. Haskins and his shelf of battered books. You think about Friday afternoons and taking the book home and reading it twice before Monday morning. You go on Tuesday. The settlement house on Globe Road is a different world again. Not Whitechapel and not Kensington. Some third place. A brick-terraced house that has been converted and filled with purpose. The reading room off the hall with its shelves and its fire and its smell of books and coal smoke and something else. Something you can't name immediately and then name. Comfort. It smells of comfort. Mrs. Alcott is smaller than her letter suggested. She has the kind of face that is not beautiful and does not try to be, and has arrived somewhere better than beautiful, which is interesting. She's perhaps 35 and has a direct manner and the kind of warmth that comes from paying attention, rather than from performance. She does not ask you anything about your life. She shows you the shelves and tells you the borrowing rules, and says the room is available from 6 until 9 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and does not make you explain yourself. The books on the shelves are various, some clearly donated by people clearing houses, old novels slightly musty, their spines stiff. Some recent. You see the Strand magazine in a pile, several issues. Hardy, George Eliot, Dickens, a collection of poetry, natural history, history of various kinds. You take, on that first Tuesday, a copy of Far from the Madding Crowd. Thomas Hardy, 1874. You've heard of it but never read it. You take it, and go home and read it by the light of the tallow candle at Six Smiths, propped up on your elbow on the palliasse, your coat over your shoulders for warmth, and you read until the candle gets low and you stop. Not because you want to, but because you can't waste candle. Bathsheba Everdeen. A woman who inherits a farm and manages it herself and makes her own choices and makes some of them badly and lives through the consequences and keeps managing. You lie in the dark after you blow out the candle and you think about Bathsheba Everdeen for a long time. The third thing that happens on that Thursday is smaller than either of the others and also larger than both of them together. You're on the corner of Durward Street at 9 in the evening. The December cold turns sharp and clear. The fog has lifted for once. A clean winter night with stars visible above the rooftops. And a man stops and you begin the negotiation. And the negotiation is fine. Everything is fine. The price is agreed and the arrangement is clear. And then something happens. He says something. A specific thing. Not violent. Not a threat exactly. Just something that requires of you the absolute absence of yourself. The complete erasure of the person who went to the hospital with Dora this morning and borrowed Bathsheba Everdeen and stood on Waterloo Bridge and looked at the river and thought and felt and knew things. And you do it. You do what the negotiation requires, and it's not the first time you've done it and probably not the last. But standing afterward in the alley in the cold, clear December night, you feel the gap between who you are and what this requires you to become very sharply, more sharply than usual, the gap between Agnes Miriam Cole from Bisley and what she's doing in this alley on this Thursday night. It's not a crisis. You don't allow it to be a crisis, but you feel it the way you feel the cold through the cobblestones, not dramatically, not catastrophically, just as a real thing that is happening, constant and present and true. You pull your coat straight and you button the top button and you walk back to the street. The stars are out. In Whitechapel, this is unusual enough to notice. Usually the coal smoke covers them. Tonight the air is clean enough that you can see Orion above the rooftops tilted, his belt 3 close stars, his sword hanging, the whole of him visible between the chimneys of Durward Street. Orion over Whitechapel, the same stars Mr. Haskins showed you once on a winter evening, the whole school standing outside in the Bisley cold, him pointing up, the same stars, everything else different. You put 2 shillings in your pocket and walk home. Christmas passes, not like Christmas anywhere you've known it. The lodging house doesn't celebrate as such. There's a 6-penny dinner at the Shelter, turkey and potatoes, which you go to, and there are paper decorations in the coffee shop window on Commercial Street, and the pubs are fuller and louder on Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day is cold and grey and mostly like every other day except the market's closed and Albert doesn't have his stall out. And you eat bread from the day before and drink water and read Far from the Madding Crowd by the window light, the pale December sky doing just enough. On Boxing Day, there is a pantomime at the Cambridge. You can't afford the price of entry. You stand outside for 20 minutes and listen to the sound of it through the walls. Laughter in waves, a song, more laughter, and the brass of the orchestra underneath everything, warm and distant. Then you're cold enough that standing is not worth it, and you walk home. January, February. February is the hardest month, it always is. December has Christmas, which is something, even if Christmas is just a different kind of ordinary. January is long and cold, but at least you can tell yourself it's the beginning. February is the end of winter, insisting on continuing past its reasonable length, and the cold has been so long by February that your body treats it not as weather but as condition, permanent, constitutional, as if cold is your natural state. Dora comes back from the hospital in February. Not well, she will not be well. The hospital was clear about this, but stable. They sent her with instructions about diet and fresh air and rest, all of which are impossible in Sixsmiths. But she's back, and she's alive, and her cough has quieted slightly, and Pearl gets her the cleanest palliasse in the warmest corner, and Maisie contrives to include her in meals, and nobody discusses it, because this is how things work here. March. The first day in March, when the air changes, when the cold doesn't lift. It doesn't lift yet. March is still winter for the most part. But the quality of it shifts. Something releasing. Something in the light at the end of the afternoon a fraction warmer than the day before. You feel it in your face standing on the corner. A weakening of the February cold. You've been here 2 years now. 2 years and 3 months. You know everything about this street, about this neighbourhood, about the 40 yards of pavement between the corner of Durward Street and the pub and the chip shop. You know the timing of the constable's rounds. You know which nights are good and which are not. You know the other women, Nell and Clara and Maisie and Pearl and the newer ones who've come in the past 6 months. You know the lodging houses and the coffee stalls and the shelters and the market and the hospital and the settlement house with its reading room and its fire. You know this place the way Dora said she knew it, better than your own face. The Tuesday evenings at the reading room have continued through winter. Mrs. Alcott knows by now, or has concluded, what you do for a living. She has never said this directly, neither have you. The reading room continues to be available on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the fire to be lit, the books to be there. You've read Far from the Madding Crowd twice. A novel by George Gissing about London poverty, The Netherworld, which you found troubling in the way that accurate things are troubling. Several issues of the Strand magazine with Sherlock Holmes stories, which you read with a particular interest because Holmes operates in a London that is nominally the same London you live in, the late Victorian London of hansom cabs and telegraph messages and Baker Street. But that bears almost no resemblance to Whitechapel in the same years. Holmes's London is a puzzle to be solved. Your London is a condition to be survived. Both versions are true. The difference is who you are in each one. You've also borrowed and been returning a book of poetry, Alfred Lord Tennyson, In Memoriam. The library copy, its cover worn soft. You read it on the palliasse by candlelight or by the grey window light on Sunday afternoons, and the formal stanzas, the ABBA rhyme, the regular beat, do something that surprises you, which is that they feel like something solid to hold on to. Not the content specifically, it's about grief and faith and doubt, about a dead friend, nothing directly relevant to your life, but the form, the regularity of it, the sense that a structure has been built and you can lean on it. Mr. Haskins would be pleased. He always said poetry was for difficult times. You're still, in April, trying to figure out what you're going to do. Not immediately. The immediate is always handled, always calculated. But eventually, you're 22, and this life has a trajectory, not a pleasant one, and you know it because you can see it in Dora and in some of the other women who have been here longer. It is not a sustainable thing, not physically, not in terms of what the body can do as it ages, not in terms of the law, which is only more hostile as Parliament keeps considering new measures, not in terms of the arithmetic, which works now, but is fragile, always one illness or one arrest away from not working. You think about what you could do, what exists on the other side of this, if there is a side. You can read properly. Mr. Haskins gave you that. You can negotiate. You've been negotiating every day for 2 years. You can observe. You know how people present themselves and what the presentation conceals and how to read the difference. These are not nothing. These are skills. if they can be made to work for something else, something that doesn't require this, doesn't require the alley behind the chip shop and the 14 pence and the constant calculation of 4 pence. Mrs. Alcott, one Tuesday evening in March, mentions almost in passing that she knows of a position. A woman who takes in sewing, piecework, slow pay but regular, nothing glamorous, nothing that would solve everything, but regular. You think about the factory on Commercial Road and the matchwork shop in Stepney, and you think about all the jobs that didn't work, and you think about sewing, and you know that sewing is another form of the same poverty, the piecework poverty of women's work in the 1890s, another variation of working hard for less than a man would earn for the same hours and the same skill, but regular. Regular means you know what you're getting. Regular means the arithmetic changes from daily to weekly. Regular means something. Tell me more, you say, Mrs. Alcott tells you. A woman in Mile End who takes in dress alterations is looking for someone to help with the plain work, hemming, basic seaming, the less skilled portions of the alterations, and pays 10 pence per piece finished, paid weekly. The work comes in waves, heavy sometimes and light sometimes, not enough on its own, but not nothing. Not nothing. April settles in. The cold loosens its grip by degrees. The mornings are still cold, but the middays have something to them. The pale spring sun doing actual work for the first time since September. You're still at 6 Smiths. You're still on Durward Street in the evenings. You're still calculating 4 pence and 6 pence and the economics of the week. But you have also written in careful handwriting to the woman in Mile End and received a response, and are going on Thursday to meet her. The city goes on around you. The market on Petticoat Lane, Albert's stall on Commercial Street, the harmonium man on the corner when the weather is right, which it is more often now, his indeterminate tune drifting down to you on a spring morning that smells less of coal and more of something else. What is it? Grass? The barely there smell of park somewhere to the north and west, carried on a wind that has briefly forgotten to smell of the East End. You stop and listen to the harmonium for a moment. The tune wanders somewhere that might be a hymn, and then somewhere that might be a music hall song, and then somewhere only the harmonium man knows, a country of one, private and complete. An old woman stops beside you listening. She's tiny, this woman, barely 5 feet, in a black dress and a white apron and a cap that suggests she's someone's cook or housekeeper, her marketing done, standing here in the April morning listening to an indeterminate tune from a barrel instrument played by a man in a coat from another decade. She shakes her head slowly, approving. Nice morning for it, she says. Not to you specifically, just to the air. Very, you say. She moves on. The harmonium plays. You stay another minute, the April sun on your face, the smell of something faint and green in the air. A Tuesday morning in Whitechapel in 1894. Everything exactly as it is and nowhere near what it could be, and none the less this, just for a minute, being exactly here. The sewing works out. Not dramatically, not like a solution, more like an additional calculation, a new variable in the same equation. You go to Mile End and meet the woman, Mrs. Finn, a precise and practical woman of 50, who has been doing alterations since her husband died and has no particular sentimentality about any of it. And you show her your stitching, which is competent if not skilled, and she gives you a piece to finish on trial, and you finish it well enough that she gives you more. 10 pence per piece. 3 or 4 pieces a week to start if you're quick, which means 2 shillings 6pence or so, in addition to what you already earn. It's not enough to stop work in the street entirely. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. But it shifts the arithmetic, introduces a steady thread into the weekly calculation, makes the bad nights less catastrophic. You carry the sewing in a bag that Mrs. Alcott gives you, a cloth bag with a sturdy handle, and you bring pieces to and from Mile End twice a week, and you work on the hemming in the reading room on Thursday evenings when the light is good, and Mrs. Alcott doesn't mind, and Mrs. Alcott doesn't mind. The girl with the red hair from the Salvation Army shelter. You see her again, in May, on Brick Lane. She's grown in 6 months visibly, taller, the dress still too small, wrists still out past the cuffs, but she's growing into herself, her face less pinched in the warmer weather, a touch of colour in her cheeks that the cold had flattened out. She recognises you from the shelter. Her eyes go to your earrings. Still pretty, she says. Still there, you say. She looks at your cloth bag, curious. Sewing, you say. I'm doing alterations. She thinks about this. Is it good work? It's work, you say. The distinction being everything and also nothing depending on the day. I'm going to work in a shop, she says. When I'm old enough. A draper's shop. I've decided. She says this with the absolute certainty of 12, the certainty that exists before the world has had time to apply its corrections. You look at her, and you do not say anything that would interrupt that certainty, because it costs nothing to let her have it, and it might, possibly, against the odds, be true. Good choice, you say. She nods, satisfied, and goes on down Brick Lane. You watch her go. June. The city in summer is a different city, hotter, more pungent. The smells that the winter cold suppressed returning with compound interest. The Thames in summer is something else. On hot days the smell of it reaches Whitechapel clearly, carries on the warm air, and it is not romantic. It is the smell of what a great city deposits into its waterway. But the evenings are long. The evenings are almost pleasant sometimes. The light lasting until 9, 10, the street still warm from the day, the fog gone, the Whitechapel nights in June having a quality of space and openness that the winter nights don't have. The sky actually visible above the rooftops. Sometimes stars, sometimes cloud. Always the orange tinge of gaslight on everything. On a June evening you stand on the corner of Durwood Street, and the warm air is around you, and the light is still fading to the west in a gradual way, red and orange above the rooftops, and someone goes past playing a mouth organ, a cheerful tune, a move in a music hall song already fading as the player walks away, and you think, this is also Whitechapel. This, the warm evening and the fading red light and the mouth organ, is also Whitechapel. Not just the fog and the cold and the 4 pence and the calculation. Also this. You've been here 2 years and you're still calculating 4 pence, but the calculation is different now, slightly. The shape of the week is different. There is the sewing and there is the reading room, and there is Maisie and Dora, who is still alive, still coughing, still telling stories about Portsmouth and the Navy, and there is Captain Birch with her practical warmth, and Albert with his stewed tea, and the old woman at the harmonium, and the girl from the shelter with a certainty about the draper's shop, and there is you, Agnes Miriam Cole, 22 years old, from Bisley in Gloucestershire, who has been in London for 2 years and 3 months and knows more about the price of everything in Whitechapel than Mr. Booth and all his colour-coded maps could capture. The city does not resolve. It doesn't arrive at conclusions. It simply continues, and you continue in it, and the calculation changes slowly, and the terms of the equation shift, and you're still here. Still accounting, still adding up what you have against what you need and working the difference. Summer passes to autumn. The evenings shorten, the fog returns. Your coat, the Kensington coat, the navy blue one, is out again and it's warm enough, and the sole on your left boot is wearing through again, the boots from Petticoat Lane only having lasted 6 months in the end. But you have more to work with now. The arithmetic has shifted, not enough, not by a mile, but the direction is different. A Tuesday evening in October, the reading room on Globe Road. Mrs. Alcott has put out tea. The fire is going. You're sitting by it with your hemming in your lap, working through a hem on a serge skirt, the needle going through the dark fabric with the tiny, regular, repetitive motion of the work, and someone reads aloud. Mrs. Alcott reads sometimes, on the evenings when there's a small group, and what she's reading is Hardy. Another one, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, published a few years ago, still being talked about. The story of a rural girl, a farm girl, whose life goes in directions she didn't choose. You sew and you listen, and the fire crackles, and outside it's October in London, and the fog is beginning on the streets. You can feel it, the particular change in the air that precedes it. Inside it's warm. The tea is hot. The needle goes through the serge and comes back and goes through again. Some things you know. The price of a bed at Six Smiths has not changed. 4 pence. The price of Albert's tea has not changed. 1 penny. The fog will come every October and will lift every May. The streets will be cold and the constables will do their rounds and the market will open on Sundays and close on the big holidays, and everything will come and go and come again in the particular rhythm of this neighbourhood that is as regular as any rural calendar if you know how to read it, and you know how to read it. You know this place the way the river knows its banks, not because you chose it, but because you're in it, because you've been in it long enough that it's in you now, the smell of it, and the sound of it, and the feel of the cobblestones and the weight of the October air. You are not where you intended to be. This is not the life you saw from Bisley at 12, reading borrowed books on Friday evenings, the future open in the particular unexamined way of a life not yet begun. But it's the life you have, and you're still here. And the needle goes through the serge, and the fire is warm, and Mrs. Alcott's voice is reading about Tess, and the October fog presses gently against the windows of Globe Road, and outside the city goes on being what it is, which is enormous and various and brutal and beautiful and indifferent and present. Tomorrow there will be the morning and the cold floor and the tea from Albert's stall and the arithmetic of what you have against what you need. Tomorrow there will be the walk to Mile End and the hemming and the 10 pence per piece and the slow accumulation. Tomorrow there will be Maisie and the sounds of the lodging-house and Dora's quieter cough in the corner and the harmonium man if the weather is good enough. But tonight, just now, in this specific moment, there is the fire and the tea and the needle and the wool and the sound of Mrs. Alcott reading, her voice even and clear, and the October evening held at bay by the simple warmth of a room with books in it. You have been cold and you are warm. You have been hungry and you are fed enough. You have been frightened and you are right now safe. These are not small things. In the place where you live, these are not small things at all. Put the needle down. Let the serge rest in your lap. The fire is good. Mrs. Alcott reads on. Outside, the city. Always the city, breathing, moving, enormous, indifferent, alive. The dockers and the carters and the match girls and the clerks and the merchants and the judges and the beggars and the cook in her black dress going home through the market with her basket, and the girl with the red hair who's going to work in a draper's shop, and Mrs. Greenberg at her tea stall, and Captain Birch at her shelter, and Albert at his stall in the grey morning, and the harmonium man on his corner playing his wandering tune, and all of it at once. The 600,000 lives of this neighbourhood, in this city, on this island, in this October, in this year, and somewhere in it you, warm tonight. That's enough. Let your eyes close. The fire makes its small sounds, crackle and settle. The kind of sounds that have been there since there were fires, since there were people gathered around them, which is as long as there have been people, which is longer than you can quite imagine. The city will be there tomorrow, the fog, the cobblestones, the arithmetic. Tonight just this. The warmth comes through the wool of your coat, and through the chair and into your back and your shoulders, and the parts of you that have been cold for so long that warmth feels like a discovery each time. Let it come. Agnes Miriam Cole, from Bisley in Gloucestershire. 22 years old and all of it still ahead. The full uncertain weight of it. The fog and the clear days, the cold and the June evenings, the calculation and the fire. All of it still ahead. But right now, just the room, just the fire, just Mrs. Alcott's voice reading about a girl who made choices she didn't choose in a world that hadn't decided whether to be fair to her yet. The same world, just different rooms in it. Let the sounds of the city go quiet. They don't stop. They never stop. Not this city, not entirely, but they soften. The layer between you and them thickens the way sleep thickens everything, the way the warm wool thickens the air around you. Let it come. Centuries from now, this street will not exist. The lodging house on Flower and Dean Street will be gone, cleared in the name of slum clearance and social improvement, and the improvement will be real, and it will also not have addressed the reasons the slum was needed in the first place. And people will still be making the same calculations, the arithmetic of what you have against what you need, just with different numbers. The fog will be gone. The Clean Air Act of 1956 will do for the pea soupers what nothing else managed. The Thames will smell of something approaching water. But people will still be in this city, still working through their days, still calculating, still trying to get through. Some things don't change. The arithmetic of survival doesn't change. The need for a warm room at the end of a long day, that doesn't change. The way a fire sounds when it's doing its work. The way warmth moves through cold into the body and something lets go that had been held tight, that doesn't change. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Agnes on Globe Road on an October evening in 1894. The surge in her lap and the fire warm and Mrs. Alcott reading and the city going on outside. Let the warmth hold. Let the sounds soften. Let the arithmetic rest until morning. You've done enough today. You've done the calculation, and you've walked the miles, and you've felt the cold through the cobblestones, and you've been present in the fog, and you've kept yourself safe, which in this city, in this year, in this life, is no small thing. You've earned this. Take it. Let the fire hold the room. Let the night hold the city. Let sleep hold you. Good night.